My biggest off-grid failure. Now, the year is 2020. It is middle of June, actually towards the end of June. My wife and I are just about to make the plunge and move completely off-grid. Got all of our permits for building out here, got everything lined up. The county I live in requires that you have an RV to live in if you're going to live on your property while you're building. So we had to get an RV, at least so we didn't have to deal with problems later. So we get this RV, right? We bring it out to the property, park it on top of a hill, and it's on the hill. I've got everything situated. First thing I do is I set my solar up. I'm busting my ass the first 2 weeks we're out here, okay? Now, storage-wise, all we have are a couple of buildings that I had been working on the year prior to moving out here, okay? So we had, a pallet shed that I built. You can see videos of this. It's actually really nice. I got to do an update on it now. It's really kick-ass now, but at the time it was more or less a shack. It was a pallet shack. I had an earth bag building that I had started, and because I was doing all this stuff on my own because I was driving out here by myself for a few days at a time. And the bags were done, but there was no roof on it, okay? We had a basic pallet fence for the animals, so that was squared away. But all we really had for storage was this one shed that had a roof on it. It was about 200 square feet. Now, of course, my wife and I being married for, at the time, close to 20 years, you accumulate some stuff over the years. So we didn't want to get a storage unit. We come out here with this stuff. We pack the shed full of everything we have. And then, of course, we have all this excess stuff. But some of it's sentimental stuff, picture, photo albums, stuff like that. So the idea that I have is, at the time, now we couldn't afford a shipping container because, we had all of our money tied up. We just bought this property. We paid cash for it. We basically had all of our money tied up in, we bought equipment, we bought solar, we bought the freaking RV. So, we're getting pretty low on funds here, really low. So for us, we just said, I can't afford a shipping container. Because that was one of the first things we had thought of, a shipping container, right? So we pack everything into the shed. And then the rest of our stuff, my idea that I had because of money, was a problem, was to get those billboard tarps. You've probably seen them. They're like billboard tarps. They advertise them all the time. I actually still use these things quite a bit out here. But they do have their limits, as you're going to find out. So I buy all these billboard tarps, and the idea was simply put our stuff on pallets and cover them with tarps and then tie everything down. That was the best I could do money-wise, and just hope that I could get, a roof on this earth bag building ASAP, because that was going to be a farm building, but I was like, well, initially we can use it for storage for sure. So the rest of the stuff goes in the earth bag building, mainly just because it had wind protection and stuff. So I wanted to put all my stuff in there that I could. And it had a ledge that went around it, because it's like a Kiva style building, meaning it's a few feet in the ground. And I built this ledge around the outside so I could put my refrigerator. We had a new air conditioning unit. We had all this electronic stuff that we put in there. So basically to keep it off the ground, it was covered with tarps. Did the best I could, all right? And in the meantime, we're all trying to get prepared, moving out of our house. We just had a kid graduate high school. We're trying to figure out what to do with that. This is one of the busiest times of my life, just trying to get everything situated. It was that, that eustress that you get. It's not distress, it's eustress. They say there's two types of stresses, and they're both just as taxing on your body, okay? So it was a lot of eustress. I was happy and everything that we were doing. I'm like, man, we're finally doing it, But, so anyways, okay, fast forward. We get on the property. We're living life in the RV. First thing I got to do is get the solar set up. I set up solar ASAP. That's when I learned real quick that a generator is going to make me broke real quick. So we get the solar set up, at least the stuff that I had bought, okay? And I had a little bit enough set up to get going. Starts getting to be pretty hot out. You know, it's the end of June out here. Now, I got to tell you something here that so you understand my mindset at the time. I've lived in Arizona for over 20 some years. I mean, I'm on like 26, 27 years living in Arizona. Most of it was in Tucson, the city of Tucson. And it had been very dry for a very long time. We were in the middle of like this mega drought. And we would get monsoons, but they just weren't real big ones. And so I just really didn't expect that we were going to get any kind of rain that year. And I just was like it was an assumption, and you know what they say about assumptions, right? So I made this assumption, and this is where living out here for a long time actually worked against me, because I had gotten complacent with this, okay? I said, well, stuff's all covered with tarps. You know, the earthbag building is not completely done yet, but, you know, it should protect our stuff. Everything's covered. So, about 2 weeks in, we go outside in the afternoon. I look over, and I see this massive, just black almost cloud formation. And I start feeling that wind. And when you're out in the desert, you can smell the rain because of the creosote trees. So you get like this smell of rain, and you know it's coming. And so I look over, and we see this thing. And I'm like, oh shit. Like, this is when I realized it was about to get real. Because this was a big storm. And it was a big storm. So we basically get in the RV, get all of our stuff, you know, situated because the wind starts blowing a lot. Next thing you know, man, this RV that we're in, we're sitting on the couch, my wife and I, right? And the wind starts blowing like crazy, and we could feel the RV. I've never lived in an RV, and if you've ever lived in, or if you've never been in an RV during a storm, the whole thing is like rocking and shaking, right? And being new to all this, I'm sitting in here just like, oh man, dude, like this is crazy, right? And now we start hearing the rain hitting the RV, and just when we get monsoon rains out here, they're like almost horizontal rains, and so the rain is just pounding this RV. We look outside, you can't even see outside because there's so much rain on the windows. But when finally, you know, the storm starts getting lesser, I see nothing but flooding. Okay, now this is what happens when you haven't had rain in a long, long time in a desert. The ground out here is already hard. So the ground's super hard, okay? The ground in Arizona, the way it works when it rains out here a lot, is that because our ground's so hard, when we get rains, the rain really doesn't have anywhere to go. So a lot of times it'll sit on the surface of the ground, and that's why we're prone to flooding out here because of that. So it starts flooding everywhere, and I look out and I see all the water. Now we're still quite a ways away from our stuff. I haven't even taken inventory of that stuff. That's the last thing on my mind. So it stops raining. We get out of the RV. It's just, there's water flooding. You can see streams of water everywhere. And I'm like, I look over down the hill, because I also have to mention that our stuff's down a hill, because, and the reason for this is that because our farm area, you know, I figured it would stink with animals and things like that. I wanted to keep it away from where our house was going to be built. So we have our house is going to be on a hill. In the farm area, I was like, well, it's a hill or it's these two sides. So I was like, well, pick a side. We go over on the side, but it's down a hill, so it's prone to flooding down here. Not like floodplain flooding, but it's going to accumulate water, okay? So I start walking down this hill, and then I see it, okay? Because we have a wash at the very end of our property. And if you can hear, this first thing you listen for is that sound of rushing water. And I could just hear that. You know, that's the sound of water filling up in the wash. Most of the time, the washes are completely dry out here. So when you hear that, you know it rained. And so it rained a lot, because these washes, man, they fill up with water, and it's like these super fast moving rivers. They're actually quite dangerous in some places. So we have this wash. I can hear it just whoosh. And so I knew, man, I go down the hill, and I look and I see, number one, we got some tarps that blew off our stuff, because the winds out here, they get to be 30, 40 mile an hour gusts. I didn't tie down the tarps correctly, so our stuff was completely, you know, getting soaked for who knows how long. I looked down by the earth bag building. Now, I already knew there was no roof on this, but I didn't really think much of it flooding because, even if you don't have a roof, flooding is a different thing. I start walking into the entrance of this earth bag building, and then I realized something. I had built this thing like a kiva, 3 feet down into the ground, okay, because we wanted to take advantage of the geothermal to keep the temperatures like constant in there. Now, the one thing I did not do though is the doorway. I hadn't completed the doorway because the doorway basically berm dirt up around this doorway and concrete, and you use some masonry and stone, and you make this kind of berm around the top or around the stairway. So when you go down in it, there's that keeps water out. Now, we've had it this way for the last 3 years now, and it never floods in there now because that's all it needed. But at the time, I hadn't built this yet. So I can see like a stream of water going into this building, right? So I walk over and I see the first sight that I can see is our refrigerator, a brand new refrigerator, on its side, floating in the water. So I'm like, fuck, man, I'm already like starting to stress because I'm like, oh no, man, because I had my flat screen TV in there, our flat screen TV, not a big one, but still had our air conditioning unit in there. All of our electronic stuff was in there because I figured I'd protect it from the wind and everything. And what had happened was the water had flooded so much into this building. Now, this is 3 feet in the ground. The water had flooded past that 3 foot mark where it was in the ground, and it was above where, because the water is going to level itself off. And so the water was above that line where I had that ledge built around that earth bag building. So all the stuff that I had on the ledge there had basically floated into the water. It was a mess. So we had to go in there and pull all of our stuff out. I had to get a water pump all the water out. It took like 2 days for me to pump water because I didn't have a strong enough water pump. So we're doing inventory at this point, okay? Now, this is the beginning of monsoon season, and here's what's going to happen the rest of this season. It's going to keep raining because we actually had a pretty decent monsoon season. And it just kept raining. So this was the first rain that we were going to get, but there were more to come, okay? So this was not going to let off. You might get, now at this point, every day it can potentially rain in the late afternoon. That's how it works out here. So we're trying to take inventory of our stuff. Stuff's getting ruined. I mean, we have furniture that's soaked because the tarps, here's what I found out about these tarps. Not only did some of them blow off, but they have pinholes in them, okay? These billboard tarps, they're not completely waterproof. I learned that the hard way, okay? So our stuff, even though it was covered, got soaked. The shed, everything was okay. Had everything off the ground with pallets, so the bottoms wasn't getting soaked, but like I said, the tarps didn't work. The earth bag building was completely flooded. And this is my intro to living off grid, folks. I actually, living here as long as I have, because I think an advantage over some people that move out here, because a lot of people move from out of state. I've been out here for a long time, so I knew the potential of this stuff, but I've never lived out in the desert. I've always lived in like an HOA home and stuff. So the moral of the story was I was not prepared. Okay, this was my biggest failure by far because I should have known this stuff, and I did know, that this could happen. But what I did is I went with, the assumption that it probably wouldn't rain that much. It hadn't rained for years. We're going to be okay. Everything will work out. I'll just keep the stuff covered. We'll be fine. Well, that didn't happen. Okay. So a lot of stuff got ruined. Now, to fast forward through the rest of that monsoon season, we ended up getting about 4 or 5 extra rains. Okay. And it turned out that my wash was clogged, okay, because I did a video on this a long time ago, but the wash, there was like garbage and stuff from people had dumping in these washes, right? And there was like washing machines in there. I had to spend like 3 or 4 days clearing out the wash because what was happening was the water was backing up, so it was flooding everything down here. And so this is my first season off grid, okay? And so I'm already like starting to hate life, okay? Things are getting a little tense with me and the wife. because she doesn't need to do this. She's like, it's not like we had to do this. This is something we wanted to do. And I had assured her that, everything will work out. This is my plan. I went through all of our plans and everything. Well, the moral of the story that I learned was you can have all the plans you want, all right? But Mother Nature is going to do what Mother Nature's going to do. So my suggestion to you after this story, because I'm over the 15-minute mark, make sure that if you can afford it, because shipping containers have went down in price, get yourself a shipping container if you can afford it. They're made for this kind of stuff, for that kind of stuff. Like they're weatherproof, okay? And now being out here as long as I have, another thing that's really nice is they're rodent proof. Those things are gonna protect your stuff. So at the time, I didn't have the money for a shipping container, but now looking back in hindsight, I think we would have just waited another 6 months until we had the cash available to buy one of those, and we would have had a shipping container out here. And the money I would have spent on that shipping container, still, we figured out like we lost about, I would say about almost $2,000 worth of stuff that got ruined that we ended up having to put to the dump and all that. So it was a very costly mistake, and it was embarrassing, honestly, for me. So that's my story of my biggest failure off grid. If you got some good stories, leave them in the comments. I'd like to hear them. I actually, I enjoy reading the comments sometimes. So yeah, that was it, folks. Moving forward, let's hope that I don't make any bigger ones, but that was mine. Let me know yours. Over and out.